Africa Business News, proudly sponsored by EY.
Coming up on Africa Business News, the International Criminal Court drops its charges against Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta. Mr. and Mrs Mugabe are elected leaders of ZANU-PF and its Women's League. And the power crisis sees Africa scrambling for solutions. Stay tuned.
Africa, it is huge, it is diverse, and its business landscape always fascinating and dynamic. And that's our business, as you know, here on your favorite weekly African business stop. In this last episode for 2014, we are joined by Bonnie Tunya in Nairobi, Wole Famurewa in Lagos, and we will hear from Christine Mundo here in Johannesburg as well. My name is Victor Homoeswana, and this is the Africa Business News. Mambo Bonnie, your region is always dishing up some of Africa's biggest business headlines, but it has been a few days since the International Criminal Court dropped charges against President Uhuru Kenyatta. Is there an air of vindication in Kenya, and have the markets responded in any way to the announcement?
Well, Victor, you guessed right. There's a lot of reaction, a lot of responses to this particular announcement. But just to give you a background of what happened is that prosecutors of the International Criminal Court, or if you like the ICC in The Hague, have dropped or rather withdrawn charges of crimes against humanity against Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta. And he has been indicted in connection with post-election ethnic violence in 2007 and 2008, in which 1,200 people died. Now, Mr. Kenyatta, who had denied the charges, said that he felt vindicated. The prosecutor's office said that Kenyan government had refused to hand over evidence vital for the case. A lot of debate continues, Victor, but as it stands now, he stands vindicated.
Well, we know also that Rwanda did it, Tanzania followed suit. I'm talking about issuing Eurobonds, but Ethiopia has played its hand, Bonnie, issuing its maiden Eurobond, which is also oversubscribed as we speak. What will Ethiopia be doing with this money raised, and what is the chance that it will be the first and the last?
Eurobond seems to be the most fashionable thing for African economies to do right now, and Ethiopia raised $1 billion in a debt international bond issue, taking advantage of record demand of high-yielding African debt to fund electricity, railway, and sugar industry projects in Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia, which is the fastest economy in Africa and the biggest coffee producer, is joining issuers like Ghana, Kenya, Senegal, and the Ivory Coast, who sold what the Standard Bank Group calls it a record $15 billion Eurobond this year. The government and its corporate issuers are seeking to benefit from investor appetite for higher returns before the Federal Reserve raised interest rates as soon as the next year. And Victor, what is notable is that most of the capital raised will be used to develop sugarcane plantations in Ethiopia, a 6,000 megawatt hydropower dam on the tributary of the Nile River, and the country's railway network.
Thank you for joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. We are joined by Christine Mundo in Southern Africa next. Stay tuned. We're still with Africa Business News, and I'm with Christine Mundo here in Johannesburg. Christine, in the region, I doubt if we can find a bigger story than the election of President Mugabe as the leader of ZANU-PF yet again, and the wife, the First Lady, as the head of the ZANU-PF Women's League. Tell us about that.
Well, you're quite right. The president was re-elected at the recent Congress, and he stands for re-election in 2018. That would make him 94 years old when he stands for that re-election. And you're quite right. His wife has now been elected the head of the Women's League, and that's a very powerful position within the ZANU-PF party. But I think most notably, if this is any comfort, the economy did take center stage at that Congress. They discussed the issues, of course, we know those being the limited foreign direct investment, but of course the sentiment that the government is now approaching, for instance, the West through those financial institutions to try and bring money into that economy.
And in South Africa, Eskom, I know you had a briefing yesterday. What are we likely to see with these power outages? Are we going to have a dark Christmas as we are beginning to fear?
Well, not necessarily a dark Christmas, but I think that in the next 18 months, I think it's pretty much clear that we are going to be having serious power issues. It boils down to the structural issues, but what's caused this current problem at the moment is, of course, the fact that they ran out of the diesel supplies. We know that Eskom has been using its diesel-powered power stations more than anything. In fact, you're not meant to use those, but that's what they've been making use of, and they ran out of diesel at this point in time. So I think structurally the issues are that, you know, there is a lot of the infrastructure that is ailing. I mean, of the 45,000 megawatts that South Africa can generate, it's only accessible to about 28,000. And of course, anything that happens, it can be as small as a leak to a boiler or as big as a whole silo bursting. You can imagine the kind of pressure that puts on the system entirely. Okay, I would like to bring Wole Morewa into this conversation because the power struggle is not unique to South Africa. Ghana's power crisis has also led to widespread load shedding, severely impacting its economic integrity. Wole, just how big is this impact, and are there any lessons or insight that can be shared between these two African nations?
Well, of course, it's a massive impact. This is already an economy that is already struggling with a very weak currency. We know inflation is firmly in double digits, so a lot of big challenges already. But then, of course, the power problem is a big part of that. And many more companies are beginning to speak out now. We're hearing Vodafone, for instance, in Ghana, making a point that the cost of fuel, buying fuel for some of its sites has gone up by as much as 155% in the last year alone. So clearly this is something that is hurting companies very deeply indeed. And we're talking large companies, we're talking small companies. It's really hurting everyone. And in terms of lessons, I guess really it's all about building capacity. I think that has been the challenge in Nigeria, in West Africa as a whole. And I guess that's the same issue that South Africa is struggling with right now.
All right, let's get back to Christine. Is there an end in sight here, Christine? Because we are missing deadlines. Kusile and Midupi, these two coal-fired power stations expected to add 4,800 megawatts or so to the grid. Are they the answer to our problems? Finally, will we be able to say, now we are done, we don't have any more crisis?
They are the long-awaited answer eventually. So we're looking about in the 10, 15 years, that's of course in the long term. But in the short term, which is about now to 5 years' time, we need at least 3 units to come online, 2 from Medupi and 1 from Kusile. Then we can at least sustain current economic growth rates. But then the question remains, we want to grow beyond the current economic growth rates. So how do we get about doing that? And there's been an interesting discussion about growing an economy despite power constraints. I mean, if you look at the likes of India, if you look at the likes of South Korea, those countries are growing despite having, some would argue, similar or worse power constraints. So I think that discussion certainly needs to pick up because this is the reality.
Well, not in Africa's most sophisticated economy. Next up, we hear from Wole Morewa as he continues his update on the West Africa's top stories. We check into West Africa now, where Africa's richest man has gained another title this week. Aliko Dangote has been named the 4th Forbes Person of the Year. Wole, was there a feeling that this award was long overdue, and what made him win this time around?
Yes, absolutely. I think that there was that feeling that this is something that Aliko Dangote should have picked up several years before now, in fact, because clearly his ambition, his drive to really invest in Africa is so inspiring. Of course, we do know that he did rise up the Forbes list, the international Forbes list this year, and his value was now rated at $25 billion. That number has come down quite a bit since then because of the fall in the share price of Dangote Cement.
Going back to Africa's power despair, Nigeria is the continent's largest economy, but South Africa still produces 10 times more electricity for a population 1/3 the size of Nigeria's. How does the West African nation play to stay on top, Wole?
Well, Nigeria's power minister has said that the long-awaited transitional electricity market for the country will be declared later this year or by early January. Stakeholders in Nigeria's power industry say the declaration of the transitional electricity market will launch the Nigerian power sector into a commercially viable and technically sustainable electricity market. Some of the conditions which must be met during the interim period between the completion of the privatization process, which of course happened recently, and the start of TEM, as it's called here, include the execution of market participation agreements and system regulation. So everybody's looking forward to this. It really will indicate that the power industry in Nigeria has become really commercial. The takeoff of TEM, the big thing that it really does is to make sure that some of the contracts that have been signed relating to the power sector will begin to take effect.
And the oil industry somehow in Nigeria delivers big stories every week. I'm curious to see if the decision by Parliament that Shell should pay $2 billion for an earlier oil spill will be implemented. In the meantime, Nigeria's state governors may be reviewing their 2015 budgets. Wale, tell us why they would do that.
Well, this is definitely an oil price story. As you do know, even Nigeria's government has already reviewed the budget price for next year. That has moved down to $73 per barrel and further down to $65 per barrel as you continue to see the oil price slide. And the way the revenue base of many of the states in Nigeria is constructed, they really depend on those oil revenues. So every month they do get their piece of the action, if you like. The federal government takes a stake and the states get a bit of it. And the issue here is that quite a few states depend so largely on those revenues. In fact, many states are said to depend as much as 90% of their revenues are linked to the oil revenue. So a state like Lagos, for instance, is very different because it's more or less a 50-50 split in terms of internally generated revenues and oil revenues. But then again, some states are really heading for some really difficult times as the oil price continues to slide.
Well, thank you, Wale. That takes us to the trivia of the week, but not before we get to hear about the favorite stocks of Wale and Bonnie. Stay with Africa Business News. And at this point, gentlemen, Wale and Bonnie, we ask you, I have $10,000 burning a hole in my pocket. I would like to invest it in a stock in your region. Which share do you recommend and why? What about you, Bonnie?
Well, I'll stick to the stocks that have been doing well all week long. Last week I said Safaricom. I put my money on Safaricom again. Has had an impressive rally all week long. We had highs of 14.95, closing the day yesterday at 14.80. Looking at all the investments they're doing in security, LG rollout, 4G rollout. So that's really where I should put my $10,000. So, Safaricom it is.
You bought shares in Safaricom last week. Bonnie says buy more shares in Safaricom. How about you, Wale Famureo, out of Nigeria?
Well, definitely this is the time where a lot of money is on the sidelines given the volatility we've seen in the financial markets in Nigeria. So I will be one to wait it out a bit and get a sense of where the Naira strengthens and some stability there. But once we get that, I think I would be betting on Diamond Bank. And Diamond Bank clearly has a very strong retail banking franchise in Nigeria. And when you look at the valuations, it's certainly looking attractive right now.
All right, a bank out of Lagos and Safaricom out of Nairobi, Kenya. Our trivia this week to the Africa Business News family is about which country celebrates its Independence Day on December 9th. It is still one of the most stable democracies in Africa, which means if I tell you the region of the continent in which it is found, I would have given away the answer. So who's going to take a shot at this one?
Sounds like something I know. Tanzania?
Tanzania, of course. Tanganyika, as it was known back, gained independence from British rule on this day in 1962, after which Zanzibar became independent in 1963, paving the way for the unification of the two in 1964 to form what is called the United Republic of Tanzania, the land of Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, which boasts several tourist attractions, including the iconic Kilimanjaro and Serengeti. Do not forget the unique geological phenomenon called Tanzanite, for those who are keen on jewels. Burkina Faso, of course, also on December 11th commemorates its independence, as well as Madagascar, the Fourth Republic Day on the same day. But for the 9th of December, it's Happy Independence Day to the people of Tanzania. We thank Bonnie Tunya in Nairobi, Wale Famureo out of Lagos, earlier Christine Mundo here in Johannesburg. We are back with you on January 13, 2015, folks. Until then, you can continue to get all your Africa business news updates on CNBCAfrica.com. Until the new year, we wish you all a happy and safe festive season.